In this video, we'll go over 10 of the worst Pyro type monsters, in a pool of monsters which is one of the least plentiful in the game. And at number 10, we have Burning Algae. This card has the effect that when it's sent to the graveyard, you increase the life points of your opponent by 1,000. And its stats are not very good, so it basically only has detrimental effects to you, as it increases your opponent's life points and not your own. However, if you play this card in a bad reaction to Samachi deck, that 1,000 life point increase can turn into 1,000 burn damage. And 1,000 points of burn damage isn't half bad. And this card is only ever used in bad reaction to Samachi decks anyway, as they have very few monsters to put on the field to protect their life points or something. It was kind of in the earlier versions of the deck. They don't really use the card anymore, but technically it is useful in those decks, which makes it a lot more useful than some of the other cards on this list. And at number 9, we have Genex Furnace. This is a level 5 monster that has the effect where if you control a face-up Genex controller, you can normal summon this card without tributing. And the intended use of this card was to maybe get Genex controller on the field in some other way, so that you could use your normal summon to bring out Furnace. That way you could use the two of them to go into Thermal Genex, which is a synchro monster that requires Genex controller, plus one non-tuner fire monster as its materials. And its level just happens to be the exact amount for both Furnace and Genex controller combined. However, Thermal Genex isn't very good. It has kind of low stats for a level 8 monster, and its effects are that it just gains 200 attack for each fire monster in your graveyard. And if it destroys a monster by battle, you can inflict burn damage to your opponent equal to the number of Genex monsters in your graveyard times 200. And besides Furnace and Thermal Genex, there is only one other fire Genex monster in the game. So it wouldn't get super high attack boosts in the deck that's trying to bring it out. So Genex Furnace is okay to an extent, as it can bring itself out without a tribute. It has a decent attack at 2,000, it's just it kinda requires a bad tuner monster to be on the field in order for it to bring itself out. Its main combo potential isn't very good, and it would be better served going into other generic level 8 synchro monsters instead. And it'd be a much better card if it could special summon itself, because it does still take up your normal summon with its pretty mediocre effect. And at number 8, we have Laval Stennon. This is a synchro monster that has the negative effect that when it's synchro summoned, you must send one card from your hand to the graveyard. However, its effects on the field is that if it's targeted by a card effect, you can banish one Laval monster from your graveyard to negate the activation and destroy that card. So, it does have a pretty decent target protection, and at 2700 attack, that's not a half bad stat line for a level 7 synchro monster. And its materials are basically just any tuner plus non-tuner fire monsters, so it could be brought out in a Laval deck without much hassle. That being said, it does have a negative effect when it's summoned, which means it's still slightly worse than the first two options on this list, even if everything else about this card is not half bad. Also, according to dual terminal lore, Laval Stennon is the combination of Laval Cannon and Violent Stella, which you can see if you look at them pretty closely. Laval Stennon obviously is those two guards combined together. And at number 7, we have Master Craftsman Gamil. This card is a hand trap that can only be activated during the damage step when a face-up monster you control battles, where you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to cause that monster to gain 300 attack until the end phase. This card's effect is not a hard once per turn, so it is possible to stack multiple copies of this card's effects onto one monster for a potential of a 900 attack boost. That is to say, it is technically a beneficial effect. It's just an incredibly minor one. I think this card sees play in the speed duel format, and only because the amount of cards in that pool is very low. I can't imagine it sees very much play, but it definitely doesn't see any play anywhere else. Especially since this card came out in 2014. It's kind of a newer card, and also kind of a wonder why it's so incredibly mediocre. Usually, when they put out underpowered cards and newer sets, I immediately assume they were probably added for Duel Links one day, but this card is too weak even for Duel Links. But hey, it at least has a beneficial effect. That is useful in lots of situations, so it's not the worst card in the world, but it is kind of like the Sparks of hand traps. And at number 6, we have Volcanic Blaster. This is a volcanic card that has a floating effect when it's destroyed by battle that allows you to place any volcanic monster in your deck on top of your deck. It also has very low stats. Now, this card is kind of an underpowered floater that searches cards from its archetype, which is kind of a wonder when the Volcanics also have cards like Volcanic Rocket, which is an excellent search card that can add a card directly from your deck to your hand, instead of having to top deck the card you're searching, which also works no matter how it's summoned instead of being destroyed specifically by battle. And it also has much better stats. Volcanic Blaster is just not very good at its job, especially since it's so convoluted on 2 levels, where it needs to be both destroyed by battle and an archetype about destroying by card effects, and it only top decks the card you're searching instead of getting it directly to your hand. But I guess it is technically a good effect, just kind of a really underpowered one, and one that didn't really see play. And at number 5, we have Invasion of Flames. This card has the effect that when it's normal summoned, no trap cards can be activated. Now, this card actually is a cause of some confusion for newer players, because the way it's worded makes it seem like no trap cards can be activated ever again, or until the end of the turn, and neither of those are the case. It specifically just stops trap cards that would be activated in response to its normal summon, and that's it. So, cards like Trap Hole or Torrential Tribute, 2 cards that require a trigger of a monster being summoned for them to be activated, would not be able to be activated in response to Invasion of the Flames being normal summoned. However, you would be able to use things like Solemn Judgment against Invasion of the Flames, because Solemn Judgment has the potential to negate that normal summon. So, Invasion of the Flame can't stop all trap cards when it's summoned, and it's also not very good anyway, because it has really low stats and only works on normal summon instead of all of its summons, and your opponent wouldn't want to waste their trap hole on this card anyway. If this card actually had a good effect in addition to this, or better stats, its effect might make sense, but it has neither of those things. It's just a really low attack level 3 monster that does nothing once it's on the field. So its effect is kind of bad, but technically not a detriment, which is why it has like a medium spot on this list. And at number 4, we have Guardian Ceal. This is a level 4 monster that cannot be summoned unless you control a face-up equipped spell card called Shooting Star Bull Ceal. And Shooting Star Bull Ceal has the effect that the monster it's equipped to loses 1000 attack, but it can attack your opponent directly. And there's 2 main uses for this card. One of them is to equip it to your opponent so that it loses 1000 attack, so that you can then attack over that monster easier. And the other is an OTK decks that use this card to attack for game, that have nothing to do with Guardian Ceal. So if you do control this face-up spell card, then you can normal summon Guardian Ceal from your hand, as it doesn't allow you to special summon it if its conditions for being summoned are fulfilled. It just no longer has the negative restriction of not being allowed to summon itself. So once this card is on the field, its effect allows you to send 1 equipped card you control that's equipped to this card to the graveyard to destroy one of your opponent's monsters. Which, hey, not a half bad effect. There is another card though, called Evocator Chevalier, who has a similar effect where you can send any face-up equipped card you control to the graveyard to destroy any card your opponent controls. And it even has 200 more attack and is much easier to summon, as it's a Gemini monster who just requires itself to be normal summoned twice. So Guardian Ceal is like a much worse Evocator Chevalier, so there's no real reason to want to use it, especially since it has a convoluted summoning requirement that requires you to play a pretty mediocre equipped spell card. One that you can't even send to the graveyard to activate Guardian Ceal's effect, as it would have to be equipped to a different monster in order for you to summon this card in the first place. And at number 3, we have Elemental Hero Inferno, who is the only Elemental Hero fusion monster that's not a warrior type. And what this card does is, if it battles a water monster, it will gain 1000 attack during the damage step only. And it also has added restrictions to it, where it can only be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned in other ways. Now, this card's restrictions and effect are both not very good, especially since its stats are pretty low for a level 8 monster, at only 2300 attack. And the funny thing is, the 2 cards required to fusion summon this card are actually not half bad. Elemental Hero Heat gains 200 attack for each Elemental Hero monster you control, so it immediately becomes an 1800 attack beat stick when it hits the field, as it counts itself, which is a pretty good stat line for a level 4 monster. And Elemental Hero Lady Heat inflicts 200 damage to your opponent during your end phase for each E-hero monster you control. She is kind of weak though at 1300 attack and was nowhere near as heavily played as Elemental Hero Heat, and it makes sense why these two cards have a fusion summon together. It's just their fusion summon card is really bad, and almost not worth using, as Elemental Hero Heat has the potential to get stronger than its fusion counterpart if you have at least 4 Elemental Hero monsters on the field. And the effect that's restricted to only water monsters for some reason is not even very good. It's just a minor attack boost. This card wouldn't even be that good if it worked on all monsters, but it only works on water monsters, which I think makes this one of the worst Pyro type monsters in the game, if one of its materials is actually better than it. And at number 2, we have Helios Duo Megistus. This is a level 6 monster that has an alternative summoning condition, where you can special summon this card from your hand if you tribute a specific monster named Helios the Primordial Sun. It can also just be normal summoned with 1 tribute. And what this card's effect is this card gains 200 attack and defense times the number of monsters you have removed from play. And also, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it during the end phase and it will gain 300 attack and defense. Now, there is another card in the game called Grandmaju Daiza, who gains 400 attack and defense for each of your removed from play cards. And Grandmaju is a level 3 monster, which is much easier to bring out, and here's the important thing about its attack gain. It works on all of your removed from play cards and not just monsters, which means Grandmaju works on banished face down cards as well, whereas Helios Duo Megistus does not. And there's also a card called Golden Homunculus, who gains 300 attack and defense for each of your banished cards as well, and not monsters, and has a much higher base attack and also requires 1 tribute for its summon, just like Duo Megistus. And the Golden Homunculus is also way better than Helios Duo. But that's not all. The deck that this card was made for revolves around the continuous trap card called Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos can special summon Helios the Primordial Sun directly from your deck when it's activated, which would then allow you to special summon Helios Duo from your hand. But Macrocosmos has the effect where all cards that would be sent to the graveyard are banished instead, which seems like it's really good for Helios Duo and allowing it to get to some pretty high attack power values. But its floating effect specifically only activates if it's destroyed by battle and then sent to the graveyard, which means if you have Macrocosmos on the field, you can't use its floating effect. So it's just a really awkward card to play in the deck it was made for, and it's not even that good. And there's much better cards that exist that kind of do what it's trying to do, but better. There is an upgraded version of this card called Helios Trice Megistus, which kind of has the same problems as Helios Duo, except it can at least attack twice, even if it does have the same downsides and it's also difficult to summon. Out of the 3 Helios cards, only Helios the Primordial Sun saw any play, even though it has the weakest effect of the 3, as it only gains 100 attack and defense for each you remove from play monsters. But it could at least be special summoned directly from the deck with Macrocosmos, which means it could be used for combo plays. And finally, at number 1, the worst Pyro type monster in the game, and that is the Dragon Piper. This is a flip effect monster that has the effect when it's flipped face up to destroy all face-up dragon capture jars on the field. And if you do destroy any, you can then change all face-up dragon-type monsters in the field to attack position. Now, Dragon Capture Jar is a continuous trap card that is specifically designed to counter dragon-type monsters, as its effect is that while it's face-up on the field, all dragon-type monsters are changed to defense position and they cannot change their battle positions. So basically, it forces all dragons into defense mode and keeps them there so that they can't attack. And Dragon Capture Jar falls squarely into the counter of specific counter cards, as it only counters dragon-type monsters, which makes Dragon Piper a counter card to a counter card. But it's even more specific as it only counters one specific type of counter card, whereas Dragon Capture Jar counters an entire type of monsters, one of the most plentiful types in the game at that. And not only does Dragon Piper only counter a counter card, it has to flip itself face up first before it can do it. You have to set this card and then wait a turn before you could even destroy Dragon Capture Jar if that was your main goal with this card. It's just incredibly convoluted and not at all good in any sense of the word. And the only reason Dragon Piper ever saw play, if it did ever see play, I don't actually know if it did, would be because it has 1800 defense. which was actually decently high in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it probably could have seen play in decks that were trying to use high defense monsters to stay alive, so that they could then tribute them for Summon's Goal or something. I'm pretty sure this card wasn't used, but its high defense is the only good thing it has about it, because its effect is kind of laughably bad, and I think it only exists because it was an anime card, where incredibly specific effects like this were pretty common. Alright, and that's it for the video. If you think I missed any worst Pyro-type monsters, or have ideas for videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And also, did you know only 30% of people who watch my videos are subscribed? So, if you enjoyed the video, you should probably subscribe so you can be notified when new ones come out.